Today, we're going to take a closer look at two of my favorite generative AI companies. The first one we're going to take a closer look is Adobe. And both these companies are ones I have talked about numerous times in this channel. And luckily, these are two stocks that have run up a nice amount in the past month or so. So in today's episode, I just want to kind of take a closer look at some recent news and also kind of just give some insight if these are companies that I'm willing to buy a lot right now, dollar cost average, or kind of just hold my position and wait for better buying opportunities. So like I mentioned, the first company is going to be Adobe. Let me know in the comments below if you can guess what the second company is before I kind of talk about it. Like I mentioned, the first one we're going to take a closer look at is Adobe, and we can see the stock price is up roughly 43.9% as I am recording today's episode. And we do see that most of those gains are roughly coming from the past month or so, from early May, is when the stock has really kind of turned a turn up. And the reason I call them generative AI companies is because earlier, if you guys have been watching my videos, I do believe that generative AI is going to be mainly a huge benefactor for the content creator, for the creativity market, at least at the beginning, right? At least in the beginning. And that's where we're at right now, especially with this generative AI. We're really in the beginning of this creativity market. And Adobe is a huge player here in the creativity space. They recently kind of announced numerous AI solutions. I personally, someone who has never used, not never, who barely used Adobe, now uses it on a daily basis just to continue to learn a lot about all their AI solutions. And I do believe there's going to be a lot of new people that continue to kind of move into Adobe to kind of test out a lot of their AI solutions, very similar to myself. So we can see Adobe right now. Let's take a closer look at financials. Cash from operations trailing 12 months, 7.8 billion. So this is a huge cash flow machine. Cash and short-term investments are roughly 6.6 billion and total long-term debt of roughly 3.6 billion. So overall, the company is a huge money-making cow. They have plenty of cash at hands, and they don't have much debt compared to their overall financials overall. Later on, we are going to take a closer look at valuation. But first, let's take a closer look at recent news. So one of the biggest things is Adobe recently had their Q2 fiscal 2023 earnings. That was on June 15th of 2023, so about 5 days ago. And over here, the CEO does mention that Adobe's groundbreaking innovation positions them to lead the new era of generative AI, giving the rich data sets, foundation models, and ubiquitous product interfaces. They also mentioned that Adobe delivered outstanding net new ARR, annual recurring revenue, and profitability in Q2, which positions them to raise their annual target. So that's great news there. And they did mention that this was a nice overall revenue growth as well, where the company achieved revenue growth of roughly 10%. So we're going to take a closer look at some of their kind of reports of what the company has kind of mentioned about generative AI. But one thing that really kind of gets me worried about generative AI, to my belief, is the cost of generative AI. So one thing that I really wanted to see is, hey, yes, this company might be seeing a growth in revenue. They might be seeing a growth in subscription, but what kind of growth are they seeing in cost expense? And I'm going to guess most of that information is either going to be in cost of revenue, in subscription. And even though the revenue grew by about total revenue grew by about $500 million versus a year ago, their cost of revenue barely grew by like $30 million. So that's great. The other thing is maybe in research and development, maybe that's where some of these generative AI solutions are gonna see some growth in expense. And it did grow by 100 billion, but not by much. So overall, it does seem like this generative AI push for Adobe is not really causing much of a growth in expenses, and we continue to see a nice healthy revenue. Here we can see a nice growth in their cash and short-term investments, and we still kind of see a nice uptrend in cash flow from operations in the trailing 12 months. So if we take a closer look at their transcript, the company showcased a lot of information. First, they mentioned that this was an astounding quarter, achieved record revenue of 4.82 billion, representing a 13% year-over-year growth. They also mentioned that they have groundbreaking groundbreaking innovations in things like Adobe Express, the launch of Firefly, the launch of their generative AI models. They also have co-pilot functionalities in their creative applications like Photoshop, like Illustrators. They also have AI-powered advancements in Acrobats. They also have a new product analytic solutions that is and the latest capabilities in real-time CDP. So we can see their AI generative solutions are not just hitting the creativity aspects, but they're hitting their whole kind of solution aspect from some of their even business to business and product analytics solutions as well. They also mentioned that their ongoing research and development investments have enabled the rapid development and deployment of Firefly, their generative AI technology, and they believe generative AI will both drive further accessibility and adoption of their products. And this is very important, right? Because, like I was mentioned earlier on, I did believe that maybe research and development might see a nice boost, but it didn't see too much of a growth expense. I'm super excited about that. And the second thing is I do believe that this generative AI is going to drive a lot more users to use applications like Photoshop. I believe what I'm doing in Photoshop right now, thanks to these generative AI solutions, it takes me about 5 to 10 minutes. But about a year ago, I would have had to be a pro in Photoshop and probably would have taken me multiple days to kind of accomplish what I can do now in a few minutes. So I do believe this opens up the door for a lot of more casual users, right? Casual users who just want to make some simple creativity, maybe not simple, some impressive creativity with very minimal time. So I do believe this kind of growth right now in generative AI is pushing for maybe new customers. The real question is going to be is how sticky of a business is this? Is this or are the people that are coming just testing it out, or are these people that like myself who are content creators and are going to be using it now almost on a daily basis? So I think that's going to be very important, and I do believe that's going to dictate if this stock and the other stock I'm going to take a closer look at are relatively cheap or are they overpriced at the moment. And before we go any further, guys, if you are enjoying the episode, make sure to hit the thumbs up. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to hit 30,000 subs. I truly, truly appreciate the help. Also, if you want to learn more about the semiconductor market, I'm a huge semiconductor geek. I have a membership. Make sure to hit join. And finally, I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video. And check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode. So the final thing I want to take a closer look at here in Adobe is they do talk a little bit more about generative AI and some of the monetization opportunities. So let's just take a closer look. They mention our generative AI offerings represent additional customer value as well as multiple new monetization opportunities. First, Firefly will be available as a standalone freemium offering for consumers as well as an enterprise offering announced last week. They also mentioned second, co-pilot generative AI functionalities within their flagship applications will drive higher our ARPUs, average revenue per users, and retention. And that's very true, right? Like I mentioned, I used to use Adobe Cloud. I used to pay for their subscription, but after a month or two, I would cancel. Now, thanks to all these generative AI functionalities, I think I'm going to maintain at least a longer membership, and I probably won't. I probably won't even close it out. Third, they do expect to have subscription credit packs will be made available for customers who need to generate greater amount of content, so a new monetization ability there. Fourth, they will offer developer communities access to Firefly's APIs and allow enterprises the ability to create exclusive custom models with their proprietary content. And finally, the industry partnerships as well as Firefly represents exciting new top of funnel acquisition opportunities for Express, Creative Clouds, and Document Cloud, right? So this is pretty interesting as well. So all these partnerships that they're going to be doing, they might start to see some small startup companies and they might be like, you know what, you guys are looking pretty interesting. You guys are in the startup phase. We can offer so much more. How about we acquire you and kind of make this kind of go even bigger than it is right now? So for that reason, I do believe Adobe is one of my favorites in generative AI at the moment. Later on, I am going to take a closer look at valuations. But first, let me take a closer look at my second company. And my second company is Unity Software, ticker U. We can see year to date, the stock is up 48% roughly as I am recording. And again, very similar to Adobe, most of those returns have come since late. This one is actually since late since late May. So not even a month ago, the company has run up 48%. The main reason is just like I've been talking about earlier this year that I do believe generative AI, the big push is going to go into where the companies that have these creative solutions, very similar like Adobe, very similar like Unity software. So Unity software, in my opinion, is a little bit harder to kind of implement because they do a lot of kind of 3D, a lot of animation, and a lot of other aspects outside of just imaging, which obviously takes a longer time to move. But there have been some amazing information about Unity that I believe makes me even more bullish for the company. First, let's take a closer look at financials. Unfortunately, financial for the company is a bit weak. Cash flow from operations in trailing 12 months is negative. They do have a lot more debt than cash, so things are looking pretty ugly. On the bright side, though, is this is a company that depends a lot in the advertisement space, especially with its recent acquisition and with Iron Source. And I do believe the advertisement market is turning around pretty quickly. I see it on my side as a content creator, how the ad space is turning super fast in my opinion. And this is a company that I believe will start to see that cash flow from operations in trailing 12 months end up being positive, and we're going to start to see this kind of total long-term debt kind of decrease over time. So financially, things look pretty hectic, but if the turnaround story for the ad space is how I see it right now, I do believe this is not a company I would worry about financially. If we take a closer look at Unity, they are pushing their AI. We haven't really heard too much about it, right? They did mention that they have a Unity AI beta program, but there's not much information out there and they haven't really released too much. But there was this really great article, and definitely recommend watching it, reading it. It was by John Coatsier. He does have a YouTube channel, and he does an interview with Unity CEO. And within Unity CEO, within this interview, Unity CEO talks about Unity's runtime and how they got really lucky. And thanks to this really good luck that they had 5 years ago, it's going to make them one of the behemoth in the generative AI market. So Unity runtime is pretty much a runtime engine that gets downloaded whenever you download any Unity game. And let me just say, there's a lot of Unity games. They do mention, he does mention that there's roughly 4 billion devices. He kind of talks about it in their transcript that they have 4 billion devices today that already have Unity's runtime in it. And what they're saying is this Unity runtime does a lot of the kind of computation of a lot of the engines, a lot of the products that Unity runs. So one thing that Unity can do now is now they can add some form of inference device into this Unity runtime engine or some form of software where if Unity starts to add generative AI solutions, you don't need to send that information to the cloud, to the server. Unity is not going to eat up that cost. What ends up happening is all these kind of large language models are going to be in that runtime engine. So that kind of inference is going to be run locally on device, and it's going to use hardware usage instead of cloud usage. And overall, in theory, it should be very minimal cost to Unity. So you're not seeing things like ChatGPT where you're paying $20 a month to kind of generate some text because ChatGPT, right? You have to kind of get that information from the cloud, from the server. But being able to do everything locally, it eliminates that cost. And this is something that Unity's CEO talked a lot about in their recent earnings, and for some reason I overheard this and overmissed it. But I do believe this is a huge benefactor for Unity, and this is going to continue to push them to be one of the favorites. After I really kind of grabbed this information here and really kind of dug deep into it, I'm even more bullish in Unity stock, and I can definitely see why the stock price has run up. Unity is one that I enjoy right now a lot. It's one that I've been saying I've been liking to buy anywhere below $30. That $28 when it dropped to almost $20, I believe last year. In November, I was one of the. That's when I was really buying my position. Now let's take a closer look at where these companies sit in forms of valuation. So first, let's start off with Adobe. So Adobe right now, I think an important metric would be price to sales ratio. Price to sales ratio is roughly 12.2. Adobe's forward price to sales ratio is 11.5, and forward 1 year is 10.27. I do want to say for Adobe right now, this is a company that, in my opinion, with a forward 1 year PS ratio of 10, is sitting maybe a tad high. Not high, right? I want to say it's properly valued to some extent where my risk to reward is not really too much in one side. It's probably somewhere in the middle. So for me, Adobe is more of like a hold position, or if I wanted to purchase, it would be more of a small dollar cost average. I would enjoy Adobe's price to sales ratio to be roughly more like 8 in the forward 1 year, and forward 1 year to be closer to 8. So that would represent roughly a 20% drop in Adobe. So that's probably closer to like the low $400. So anything near for low 400s or below is somewhere I would enjoy Adobe a lot right now. Actually, it will probably be, yeah, closer to the 400 or so sub 400s. Now, if we take a closer look at Unity, Unity's price to sales ratio right now is 8.4. Their forward price to sales ratio is 7, and their forward 1 year is 5.9, closer to 6. I personally believe that Unity is a little bit more riskier, right? It's not, it kind of doesn't have that financials that Adobe has. And for that reason, it should definitely be a lot more cheaper in terms of valuation compared to Adobe, and that's what we're seeing. But I do believe Unity right now has a lot of tailwinds that it can really pick up, especially with that advertisement space, and can really push this to kind of grow dramatically. So for me, Unity, I don't think it's a heavy buy. I really like it when the market cap is closer to like that $10 billion, and that's roughly in the low 30s, high 20s right now with the market cap of 15 billion. Nothing it's not outrageous. I personally don't think it's completely overvalued, but I would do maybe a little bit more than a hold position, maybe more than a small dollar cost average, but not go into a full complete position at these price points. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Take care, have a good day, and see you next time.